Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be looking at the games and career of José Raul Capablanca, who of course was world champion from 1921 to 1927. This theme was voted top by my patrons. We've had a poll over the past few days, and well, there are various themes that were suggested by them. But I have to say, I'm really glad that this one came out on top. It's been a joy playing through Capablanca's games, and well, you're revisiting these games. Many of them I know very well. Some weren't familiar to me at all. What I've tried to do is select games which maybe aren't that well known. I'm not just going to reproduce, the familiar masterpieces. So with that in mind, here is my first game, and I doubt whether, well, some of you might know this game, but it's from New York 1913, played in the American National at the Manhattan Chess Club, and it's against Edward Tennenwurzel. Capablanca is white. I should say that Capablanca was born in Cuba in 1888. He died in New York in 1942. He actually, well, of course he grew up in Cuba, but he went to school in the US, in New York in 1904, and actually studied at Columbia University in 1906. And it was really at that time that, of course, he had a passion for chess, but he was really able to indulge it in New York, and a lot of competition there, and that's where he really started improving and making waves. In 1909, he defeated the legendary Frank Marshall in a match decisively, and really it was that from that point on he made his name. So anyway, this was played in New York in 1913, and Capablanca was white. And the reason I've selected this game is because it features a system that Capablanca used on many occasions early on in his career, and that's this 4-knight system, and it shows one aspect of his style. I'll return to this position in a second to look at another game that Capablanca played. So this is mainline 4 knights, or one of the main lines, and here you could say the most popular move for white is to play d3, and this is the main line. So black gives the bishop on c3. White has the 2 bishops. Black regroups with the knight around here. The bishop drops back, and this is a rich position. 2 bishops, white structure could be better, and black is very solid. But instead of this main line with d3, Capablanca had a penchant for exchanging on c6. He played this on many occasions. So let's see how this develops. You can take with the b pawn, but not so good. Because after takes, well, as Capablanca showed, for example here, black recovers the pawn, but actually white gets very nice piece play in this position. So after bishop takes knight on c6, black generally recaptures with the d pawn. And now we can see the idea. It reminds me of some of the close variations of the Berlin, actually. White has this beautiful central pawn chain, and black's pawn structure, well, it doesn't look so bad, but black no longer has a d pawn, and that gives white very interesting strategic possibilities. The reason I've highlighted or wanted to feature this game and this system is that it's so typical of Capablanca that he loved a fixed pawn structure, and that allowed him security to maneuver with his pieces around that fixed structure. This was what he was really good at, and certainly in these days, the early 1900s, he understood the strategic aspects of this position extremely well, far better than his opponents. So let's see exactly what he's up to. H3. Well, black played here H6. Well, I mean, this system, one still sees this system now and again in modern times, and generally this maneuver is played, for example, here, and white, well, will attempt to play for f4, but this knight will come in here. You can get in f4, but this is a very nice maneuver with the knight. But let's see what happened here. H6. I should say there's another Kappa game that went. Oh well, I'll look at that one in a second. Sorry, let's look at the main game and then I'll look at the divergences. H6, not strictly necessary. So the knight looks like it might switch to the king side, so possibly coming to g3, maybe even g4. And black plays knight h5. Now, I don't think black played this very well, but he clearly had no idea what was coming. I mean, this is an extremely provocative move, and Kappa was duly provoked. So you can see, while white is building up really nicely on the king side, black can't do much against this beautiful central pawn chain. So black is perhaps hoping to have provoked weaknesses in white's position, but really this is exactly what white wants to do, and white has gained so many tempi. So the knight comes in. Obviously that can't be shifted because the h pawn is on prise. So black took this, and of course we take recapture with the knight's pawn, and that means that white has this beautiful pawn chain. Perhaps the possibility to attack on the g file. But black is solid enough for the time being. Queen f6, but now knight here, with the idea of dislodging the queen, so the queen moves on anyway. And now here, I'm actually quite surprised that Capablanca didn't play queen g4. Did this a couple of moves later, but I don't know. I suspect a few years later he might have played this rapidly. The endgame is very promising indeed for white because of these beautiful pawns. So he played king g2, and then f4. Perhaps he had ambitions to attack white's king, black's king. He wanted to keep the pieces on the board, but this is a bit risky actually. And here again, Kappa could have played like this and exchanged some pieces, played queen g4, and just played for an endgame. And this is a really pleasant endgame when you have this beautiful central pawn structure and you can play around the sides of it. But no, he plays queen g4 here. Well, that's fair enough. And now Capablanca rushes it. Again, I think later on in his career he would have played this in a very different way. For example, well, I mean, a move I would like to play is king h1 to perhaps look at getting a rook to g1 at some point. But the problem is, after this, you can see that this b pawn is on prise. But that's why rook b1 is an interesting move. So you want black to take here, and then so the b pawn is protected. And little by little, white can bring pieces over and start to gain control. And again, that beautiful structure in the middle just blocks out black's pieces. So black has, beautiful rooks, but because that d pawn has disappeared, then white's centre is very hard to attack. But Kappa lunges in this position. He plays d4. Now, this wins a piece, but I mean, in the game, he won very easily. But if black had played like this and given the piece here, then he would have 3 pawns for the piece. And this is not so clear. I don't think white is worse. Maybe rook f2 here or something, and to bring second rook over. But black with 3 pawns for the piece certainly is in the game there. But instead, black took this and actually, well, he sacked the piece in the wrong way, because this is very, very easy for white. After this, yeah, I've got to watch out for bishop h6. You know, if queen c2, bishop h6. So after this, well, black only has 2 pawns here, and well, now it's only 1 pawn, and well, Capablanca mopped this one up very, very easily. Let's just see a couple more moves. Okay, this one really isn't so interesting. You can see that white is consolidating. But let me go back. So first of all, I want to go back to this position. And another game of Capablanca's, again played in New York 1913, where instead of h6, his opponent exchanged on c3, and they then played queen d6. So, and once again we see Capablanca carrying out exactly the same strategy. Basically, he wants to advance this f-pawn. So, well, I don't like g6. I mean, that looks really ugly to weaken the dark squares. But it's not just that white is thinking of, you know, playing queen f3 and knight here. The real point is to get the f-pawn up the board, as we can see in this game. So f4. And once this one is knocked out, then white is left with this beautiful central pawn clump. So let's see how this works out. Okay, this was black's idea behind playing g6, but it looks horrible to weaken these dark squares. And, well, you can see black can do nothing with this beautiful pawn structure that white has. And white is just going to play here, and you play around the edges of this structure. And by this point, white already had a huge advantage. I mean, these dark squares are too weak. White can build up at leisure on the f file and attack on the dark squares. Beautiful. So this is the plan, f4. And going right back to this position, now instead of bishop b4, there is a famous game between Capablanca and Janowski. Now, I didn't want to repeat this. I've used this game on many occasions in lectures. It was on one of my DVDs, chess-based DVDs, and so I didn't want to give the whole thing again. But let me just show you the opening phase, because this has some relevance to this game. So a6 instead of bishop b4, and now bishop g4. So Janowski is playing in a very different way, hoping to somehow exploit this pin, slow white down. But just as in the main line of the 4 knights, actually white can break this pin very easily by switching the knight on c3 to e3. There we go. And in this position, well, in fact, Janowski played bishop g6 here, but white is ready to play with g4 and then shift a knight into f5. But Janowski plays this straight away. Knight h4. So beautiful outpost for the knight on f5. But, and here's the real point, that once again we use the f-pawn to improve white's structure, to break down black's center. And because there's no d-pawn, then this is a wonderful structure. And that's how the game went. And well, like I said, this is a very well-known game, so I don't want to look at it again. The rook and pawn endgame is an absolute masterpiece from Capablanca. But it all stems from the fact that white has now improved his structure, and in this rook and pawn endgame was able to attack down the f-file and use the g and h pawns as a minority attack. So there we go. There's our first little taste of Capablanca's strategy, and you can see how consistent he is in all these games. And they're all slightly different, but it's basically about exploiting White's superior pawn structure and getting in f4. More Kappa games to come over the next few weeks, and of course we'll be looking at some of his games against his major rivals such as Alexander Alekhine. That game will be coming next.